When people think of silence, they often think of nothingness, a void, a gap, a pause between moments. But silence is not empty. Silence is alive. It carries weight, presence, and vibration. It is a form of communication more powerful than words because it is not bound by sound. It moves through awareness, through energy, through the invisible language that all beings understand, but few truly hear. Silence is not the lack of expression. It is the highest form of expression when one has transcended the need to explain. When you become silent, the energy around you begins to change. People feel your silence. They may not comprehend it with their minds, but they sense it in their bodies. Silence creates tension in the same way still water reflects the entire sky. It holds everything, but it does not chase anything. It allows space for others to face themselves. In silence, you are no longer feeding the noise of the world. You withdraw your energy from reaction, from defense, from proving yourself, and in doing so, you reclaim the power that was once scattered across countless meaningless exchanges. There is a difference between silence that comes from fear and silence that comes from awareness. Fearful silence is suppression. Conscious silence is mastery. When silence is born from awareness, it speaks volumes without a sound. It does not shrink away from confrontation. It transcends it. It does not hide from emotion. It observes it. This kind of silence is not weak, it is fierce. It stands firm like a mountain, unmoved by the storm, yet present with every drop of rain. When you embody silence as energy, you stop trying to fill the space between yourself and others. You no longer need to explain your worth, your value, or your pain. You understand that the one who truly sees you will feel you even when you say nothing. Silence becomes your language of depth. It becomes a sanctuary where clarity begins to rise. You start to see what words often hide. The truth beneath appearances, the sincerity behind actions, the energy behind intent. Every word you speak carries energy, and when you choose silence, you are conserving that energy. You are directing it inward, nurturing your center. The world is constantly demanding your attention, pulling you outward with noise, opinions, and endless stimulation. But silence draws you back home. It gathers your scattered thoughts and emotions, bringing them back into alignment. You begin to hear the subtle rhythms of your own soul, the quiet heartbeat beneath the chaos. That is where wisdom lives. In relationships, silence reveals everything. When you stop talking, you can finally feel the truth of connection. You can sense where energy flows and where it is blocked. Sometimes when you become silent, you realize how much effort you were putting into keeping something alive that was already dying. Sometimes you realize that your presence was the anchor, your voice the bridge, your energy the warmth, and without your constant giving, the truth stands naked. Silence shows who reaches for you when you no longer reach out, who listens for you when you no longer speak, who values your essence when you withdraw your effort. The power of silence also lies in its ability to heal. When the mind becomes quiet, the heart starts to breathe again. Emotional wounds often stay open because we keep feeding them with stories, justifications, and questions. But silence closes the loop. It does not argue with the past. It simply allows the present to be what it is. In that stillness, understanding begins to emerge naturally, without being forced. You start to see that peace is not something you find through control. It appears when you let go. Silence refines your perception. When you stop reacting, you start noticing. You begin to perceive the subtleties of human behavior, the slight shift in tone, the hesitation in words, the energy that lingers after a conversation. You become sensitive to truth. The more silent you become, the more you hear. The more you withdraw your energy from unnecessary noise, the more magnetic your presence becomes. People feel drawn to your calm, not because you demand attention, but because your stillness creates a contrast to their restlessness. They feel safe in your silence, even if they do not understand why. There is a sacred authority that silence carries. It does not seek validation. It does not need to win arguments. It knows that energy speaks louder than explanations. When you are silent, you invite others to feel the weight of their own words. You allow the truth to reveal itself without interference. The mind wants to react, to fix, to justify, but the soul knows that silence holds the answer already. In a world that fears quietness, silence is rebellion. It is a return to essence in a culture obsessed with expression. It is the art of being rather than performing. Most people are afraid of silence because in silence, the mask falls. The ego dissolves. You are left face to face with yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, your true energy. But that confrontation is sacred. It is the beginning of inner mastery. Once you learn to be comfortable with silence, you no longer depend on noise to feel alive. Your silence becomes a boundary. It protects your peace. It reminds you that not everything requires a reaction. Not every situation deserves your voice. There is great power in withholding your energy when others expect it. The moment you stop responding to every vibration outside of you, you begin to feel the vibration within you. Calm, strong, steady. Silence teaches you that presence is more influential than persuasion, that energy is more lasting than expression. So when you pull away, do not see it as absence. Feel it as a recalibration of energy. You are not disappearing. You are recentering. You are not ignoring. You are observing. You are not punishing. You are purifying. And in that quiet withdrawal, those who once felt your warmth will feel the void left by your silence. They will sense it in the spaces between their thoughts, in the moments where your energy once met theirs. Silence, when born from awareness, is never emptiness. It is presence concentrated. It is energy distilled into its purest form. Distance is often misunderstood. People see it as separation, as something that divides, as a signal of loss or detachment. But true distance, when chosen consciously, is not an act of rejection. It is an act of clarity. Distance allows you to see what closeness often hides. When you are too near to something, you cannot perceive its shape. When you are lost inside emotion, you cannot see its lesson. Distance does not destroy connection, it reveals the truth of it. It allows both hearts to breathe again, to observe without distortion, to feel without reaction. In the noise of closeness, awareness becomes clouded. When you are constantly involved in someone's energy, you begin to lose your own rhythm. You start to respond instead of reflect. You start to absorb instead of observe. In this entanglement, you mistake attachment for intimacy and dependency for love. But when you step back, when you withdraw the energy that was constantly reaching outward, something miraculous happens. You begin to see. You begin to feel from a higher place. Distance gives you the ability to look at what once consumed you and understand it, not through the lens of emotion, but through the clarity of consciousness. When you are too close to a flame, you cannot see its full light, only its heat. You burn instead of observe. But when you step back, you see how it dances, how it moves, how it gives both warmth and danger. Distance gives you perspective. It teaches you balance. It allows you to recognize where love ends and attachment begins, where giving becomes self-neglect, and where effort turns into chasing. Many people fear distance because they equate it with loss, but true awareness can only arise in the stillness that distance provides. When you take space from someone or something, the energy begins to recalibrate. The constant exchange, the emotional loops, the repetitive thoughts, they all start to dissolve. What remains is the essence. What remains is truth. You begin to feel where your energy was leaking, where your boundaries were soft, and where your peace was being compromised. Distance gives you the ability to reclaim your focus. It allows you to redirect attention from what drains you to what restores you. In that quiet space, you remember your own vibration, the one that existed before the noise of connection took over. Awareness is born in emptiness. The moment you step away from the intensity of involvement, your senses become sharper. You start noticing details that were invisible before. You begin to see the difference between reaction and response, between wanting and needing. You begin to understand that sometimes your closeness was not love but fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of losing control, fear of facing yourself without the other. Distance brings these truths to the surface gently but unmistakably. It does not shout, it whispers. It invites you to listen to what was always there beneath the attachment. When you are emotionally entangled, your vision narrows. You see only what your emotions allow you to see. But distance expands your sight. It gives you a panoramic view of reality. You start to understand your own patterns. How you give, how you seek, how you respond to silence. Distance becomes a mirror, showing you your inner landscape with honesty. You begin to notice how much energy you were pouring into trying to be understood, seen, or valued. You begin to realize that true connection does not need to be chased. It simply flows where alignment exists. Distance also reveals the intentions of others. When you pull away, when you stop feeding a connection with your constant effort, you see what remains. You see who reaches out without being prompted, who notices your absence, who values your presence. Distance separates the genuine from the habitual. It exposes the invisible threads that were holding things together, whether they were woven from love or dependency. In this way, distance is a purifier. It filters truth from illusion. There is also a deeper kind of distance, the one that happens within yourself. Sometimes you need to step back from your own mind, from your own emotions, to truly see yourself. When you are lost in the storm of thoughts, you cannot hear your intuition. But when you distance yourself from the noise inside, awareness begins to rise like the sun after a long night. You start to notice how often you react from wounds instead of wisdom, from fear instead of faith. You begin to understand that self-awareness is not built through constant doing, but through quiet observation. Distance teaches patience. It slows down the pace of your reactions. It allows you to see the unfolding of things without the interference of desire. Many times, clarity does not come immediately. It comes after the silence of distance has done its quiet work. It comes after your emotions settle, after your attachment softens, after your perspective widens. In this space, awareness becomes effortless. It is not forced by thinking. It arises naturally, like the reflection on still water. The power of distance lies in its neutrality. It does not demand, it does not chase, it does not control. It simply allows. It allows truth to surface, energy to realign, and emotions to settle into understanding. Through distance, you begin to see who you are when you are not performing for attention, who you are when you are not trying to be chosen, who you are when no one is watching. That realization is sacred because it reconnects you with your authentic self, the self that is not defined by relationships, validation, or external love. In relationships, distance is the space where realization grows. When you stop reaching out, the other begins to feel your absence, not as punishment, but as presence withdrawn. He starts to sense the difference between your energy and the emptiness it leaves behind. He begins to see how much of the connection was sustained by your effort, by your emotional presence. Distance becomes the mirror through which he can finally feel you, not because you are speaking, but because you are silent. Awareness does not require proximity, it requires contrast. In the spiritual sense, distance is not separation, but alignment. When you step back, you are not cutting off, you are tuning in. You are allowing both energies to return to their natural state. If the connection is true, distance will not destroy it. It will deepen it. If it is false, distance will dissolve it. In both outcomes, you gain awareness. You learn what is meant for you and what was only meant to teach you. Distance creates awareness because it removes the distractions that cloud perception. It allows you to feel the pulse of your own being again. It gives you time to observe the flow of life without interference. You begin to realize that awareness is not something to seek from others. It is something to awaken within yourself. And only when you have the courage to step back, to be alone, to listen in silence, does the true awareness of love, energy, and self begin to unfold. Long before a person walks away, their energy has already begun to retreat. You can feel it in the pauses between conversations, in the way their eyes stop meeting yours, in the subtle dullness that replaces what was once alive. The body might still be there. The gestures may still look the same, but something unseen has shifted. The flow that once connected two beings begins to fade quietly, like a tide pulling back from the shore before anyone notices the change. Energy always moves before action. The soul leaves before the footsteps follow. Connection is energy. It is not the words, not the touch, not the presence of another body beside you. It is the invisible current that moves between hearts, minds, and emotions. When that current weakens, even the closest proximity feels distant. You can be sitting next to someone, hearing their voice, feeling their skin, yet sense that they are no longer there. Their energy has already taken a step back. They are still participating in form, but their essence is elsewhere. It is in those quiet moments that truth begins to reveal itself. That absence does not always announce itself through distance, but through disconnection. When energy starts to withdraw, it speaks in silence. There is no fight, no explosion, no final words. It begins subtly, less eye contact, shorter responses, conversations that lack warmth. You start to feel like you are talking to a shadow of what used to be. That's because energy has already begun to move away. When something no longer feels aligned, the soul begins to detach long before the mind understands why. The heart knows the truth before the body accepts it. And that gap between knowing and acting is where most people stay stuck, still showing up physically, while their energy has already left the room. Energy withdrawal is not always a conscious choice. Sometimes it happens naturally as growth begins to pull two paths apart. Sometimes it happens as protection when a person's spirit feels drained, unseen, or disrespected. Energy knows when it is no longer being received, and so it starts to retreat to preserve itself. The withdrawal is not punishment, it is preservation. When a person starts to lose the feeling of safety in your energy field, they start closing the gates of exchange. They may still love, but the flow no longer moves freely. Something sacred has been interrupted. You can sense it in the atmosphere, the unspoken tension that fills the space where ease once lived. The laughter feels forced, the affection feels mechanical, and the connection that once felt effortless now requires effort. That is the sign of energy already departing. It is no longer creating, it is maintaining an image of what once was. The body tries to pretend, but energy cannot pretend. It always tells the truth through frequency. When energy withdraws, silence becomes louder, small moments become heavy, and the distance within grows even when the bodies remain close. Energy speaks before words. It is the vibration behind tone, the feeling behind action, the intention beneath expression. You can sense when someone's energy still reaches for you. It feels like warmth, like gravity, like an invisible pull that transcends distance. And you can sense when it no longer does. It feels cold, uncertain, distant, like a door slowly closing. That change in energy is not something logic can explain, yet the body feels it deeply. Your intuition always knows when the flow is no longer mutual, when the connection is surviving only through habit rather than harmony. When your energy begins to withdraw, it is often the soul's way of guiding you toward truth. You may not want to leave, you may still care, but something within knows that your frequency no longer resonates with the environment. It feels uncomfortable to stay where your spirit is not expanding. That discomfort is the first sign that your energy is shifting, that you are no longer aligned with what once matched you. The longer you ignore it, the heavier it feels. The body starts to ache, the emotions grow restless, and eventually the truth becomes undeniable. Energy leaves quietly, but its absence speaks loudly. Energy withdrawal also happens within yourself. There are moments when your energy pulls away from parts of your life that no longer nourish you. A job, a lifestyle, a routine, a version of yourself. You wake up and realize that what once excited you now feels empty. That is not failure, it is transformation. Your energy is signaling that growth has outpaced comfort. It is asking you to move forward, even if your body has not yet caught up. When you resist that inner withdrawal, life feels heavy. When you honor it, life begins to move again. In relationships, energy withdrawal often comes before the final separation. One person feels the disconnection but cannot yet articulate it. They sense that the laughter doesn't reach the eyes, that the presence feels absent, that the connection is more memory than reality. The mind wants to fix it, to talk it out, to understand. But energy does not respond to reasoning, it responds to resonance. When the frequency changes, all the words in the world cannot restore what the soul has already released. Energy cannot be forced to stay where it no longer feels at peace. To understand this truth is to understand the subtle nature of connection. Energy precedes everything: attraction, attachment, affection, withdrawal. When the energy between two people flows freely, love feels effortless. When it begins to contract, everything starts to feel difficult. You can sense it in how conversations change, how silence feels heavier, how time together no longer restores but drains. That is energy communicating that something needs to shift, that a cycle is ending or a lesson is complete. Many people confuse physical presence with connection, but they are not the same. You can have someone's body, but not their energy. You can share space, but not essence. True intimacy is not physical proximity. It is energetic openness. When energy withdraws, intimacy dissolves regardless of how much time you spend together. When energy is present, even distance cannot separate two souls. Energy moves beyond form, beyond space, beyond time. It is the invisible thread that binds or releases, depending on the truth that is ready to unfold. To feel energy withdrawing is painful because it confronts you with what words cannot say. You sense the fading, you feel the space growing wider, yet you cannot hold it back. You try to reach out, but the connection feels hollow. That is the reality of energy. It flows where it feels alignment. Not obligation. You cannot control it. You can only honor it. When someone's energy begins to pull away, it is an invitation to turn inward, to reconnect with your own source instead of clinging to theirs. It is an opportunity to feel your own vibration again, to remember your wholeness without their presence. And before the body finally leaves, the soul has already whispered its goodbye countless times. Energy leaves first softly, invisibly, silently. It withdraws from shared laughter, from daily rhythm, from emotional exchange, until what remains is form without spirit. The withdrawal is not cruelty. It is truth moving toward alignment. It is the way of all energy to seek resonance and to release what no longer reflects it. The body follows where the energy has already gone, confirming what the heart felt long before words could define it. As stillness is often mistaken for passivity. People believe that to be still is to do nothing, to wait, to surrender power. But true stillness is not inactivity. It is mastery in motionless form. It is the energy of awareness gathered in one place, steady, grounded, unshaken. Stillness is the presence that makes noise lose its power. It is the force that does not chase, yet draws all things toward it. The world rushes endlessly, people talk without pause, and everything moves in pursuit of being seen. But stillness does not compete with chaos, it transforms it. It commands attention not by demanding it, but by embodying something the restless cannot grasp, peace. When you are still, truly still, your energy changes its texture. It becomes dense, magnetic, centered. Others can feel it before they can explain it. Your presence begins to shift the atmosphere around you. People lower their voices, movements slow, emotions calm. This is not manipulation, it is resonance. Stillness carries a vibration so steady that it influences everything near it. Just as a calm lake reflects the entire sky, a still mind reflects the entire situation clearly. It does not distort with ripples of emotion or judgment. It simply mirrors what is. In that clarity, attention naturally returns to the source, to you. Stillness is not the absence of power, it is power withheld from reaction. When you no longer react to every word, every impulse, every provocation, you create space. In that space, power accumulates. Most people give their energy away through constant reaction, defending, explaining, proving. But the one who remains still keeps their energy contained. They allow others to reveal themselves while remaining unmoved. In stillness, you see what noise tries to hide. You begin to observe rather than engage, and observation always brings understanding. The person who can remain still in the storm holds the real control, not over others, but over their own vibration. In human interaction, stillness becomes magnetic because it is rare. In a world addicted to movement and validation, silence feels mysterious. People are drawn to what they cannot easily read. When you are still, you no longer chase attention. You become the gravity that attention cannot resist. Your calm presence creates curiosity. It makes others wonder what you know, what you feel, what you hold that allows you to remain composed when they would break. Stillness has weight, and that weight commands respect. It teaches that true power does not announce itself, it simply is. There is a deep intelligence within stillness. It listens before it speaks, observes before it moves, understands before it acts. In stillness, you are not frozen. You are fully awake. You are watching the flow of energy, feeling every subtle vibration before choosing where to place your attention. Most people act first and regret later because they act from noise. Stillness pauses that impulse. It brings the awareness that reaction is not always response. It teaches that sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Through stillness, patience becomes a weapon and wisdom becomes instinct. Stillness also exposes truth. When you become quiet, you begin to see what is real and what is performance. You start noticing the spaces between words, the energy behind actions, the tone that reveals more than the sentence spoken. Stillness sharpens perception. It allows you to sense when something feels forced, when someone's words do not match their vibration. In noise, deception hides easily. In stillness, it becomes transparent. This is why stillness commands attention, because it creates clarity, and clarity is power. People are unconsciously drawn to those who see clearly because clarity brings safety, stability, and direction. The mind resists stillness because stillness dissolves the illusion of control. When you are still, there is nothing to do but feel. You face yourself, your thoughts, your fears, your truth. That confrontation is uncomfortable, which is why most people fill silence with movement and sound. But the few who can sit within stillness without escaping it become untouchable. They master their inner landscape. Their emotions no longer control them. Their energy no longer leaks into chaos. They move when it is time to move and rest when it is time to rest. This alignment gives their presence authority, not through force, but through peace. When you embody stillness, others begin to adjust around you. Your calmness becomes contagious. It regulates the nervous systems of those nearby. They may not understand why, but they feel safer, clearer, more grounded in your presence. That is the quiet influence of stillness. It does not dominate, it harmonizes. It shows that leadership is not always loud or commanding. Sometimes it is silent, steady, and unwavering. In that silence, people find trust because stillness feels like truth that does not need to be spoken. Stillness is deeply connected to awareness. The more still you become, the more you perceive. The senses expand, intuition sharpens. You start feeling the subtle currents of energy in others. When they are open, when they are closed, when they are genuine, when they are pretending. You start moving through life with precision instead of reaction. You begin to realize that most conflicts are simply noise, that peace is always available beneath the surface. Through stillness, you learn to access that peace at will. And when you carry that vibration, you naturally draw attention because peace is rare and magnetic in a restless world. Stillness also changes relationships. When you stop reacting emotionally, you shift the dynamic completely. People who once tested your limits start feeling their own noise when faced with your calm. Those who relied on your emotional engagement begin to feel the void of your non-reaction. Stillness holds up a mirror. It forces others to see themselves. It creates a kind of energetic accountability. Your silence makes them aware of their noise. This is why stillness feels powerful. It does not confront directly, yet it transforms through reflection. The art of stillness is not about suppressing emotion or avoiding movement. It is about choosing when to move, how to speak, and what to engage with. It is the discipline of awareness over impulse. A still person is not lifeless. They are precise. Their every action carries intention because nothing is wasted. Their words are few, but each one lands deeply. Their gaze is steady, their breath controlled, their presence unwavering. They do not chase the moment, they anchor it. They understand that attention naturally flows to the strongest vibration in the room, and stillness, when embodied fully, is the strongest vibration of all. In the natural world, the most powerful forces move silently. The earth spins without a sound, the tides shift without announcement, the sun rises without permission. Stillness is not weakness. It is nature's language of power. It is the quiet authority of alignment, the confidence of knowing that what is meant for you cannot pass you by. When you are still, you do not compete. You do not beg for attention or validation. You become the steady center in a spinning world. Others feel that calm and instinctively turn toward it, drawn by the stability they crave but cannot find within themselves. Stillness commands attention because it is the presence of mastery over movement, emotion, and mind. It is the quiet field where awareness stands undisturbed, radiating clarity that cannot be ignored. It does not force, it does not chase, it simply exists, grounded, powerful, magnetic. In its presence, everything else slows down, listens, and responds to its rhythm. There comes a moment in every connection where emotion begins to overtake awareness. You give, you explain, you wait, you hope. You begin to stretch yourself thinner and thinner, trying to hold together something that feels like it's slipping away. It's in that exhaustion, that quiet breaking point, that emotional distance becomes sacred. Because distance, when born from self-respect, is not withdrawal out of pride. It is the decision to stop betraying your own peace in the name of connection. Emotional distance is not coldness. It is clarity. It is the act of stepping back from chaos to remember your worth without needing anyone to validate it. When you create emotional distance, you are not abandoning love. You are abandoning self-neglect. You are taking your power back from the places you have overextended. You are no longer begging to be understood, no longer explaining your intentions to those who choose not to see them. Emotional distance is the moment you stop chasing and start observing. It is the moment you realize that love given without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Dignity returns the moment you stop fighting for what should never have required force. In closeness, it is easy to lose perspective. Emotions blur your sight, turning small moments into storms, turning affection into attachment. You start to confuse the depth of your feelings with the health of the bond. But distance clears the fog. When you step back, you begin to see the landscape of the connection as it truly is, not as you wish it to be. You start to notice what was mutual and what was one-sided, what was nourishing and what was draining. Emotional distance creates a mirror, and in that reflection, truth appears without distortion. To choose distance is to honor your inner balance. It is to say, I will not lose myself trying to hold what doesn't hold me. You stop offering energy to people who take it without reciprocating. You stop trying to convince others of your value. You return to silence, the kind of silence that heals rather than hides. And in that silence, dignity blooms. Dignity is not arrogance. It is the calm knowing of one's worth. It is the quiet refusal to participate in patterns that diminish the spirit. Emotional distance becomes the space where dignity breathes again after being suffocated by emotional noise. There is a strength in withholding your emotional availability from places that misuse it. It is not revenge, it is restoration. You are teaching the world how to treat your heart by the way you protect it. When you stop pouring yourself into the wrong vessels, your energy begins to settle, to become whole again. People who once overlooked you begin to feel your absence. They start to sense the weight of your silence, the loss of your emotional presence. Because when someone has felt your genuine warmth, your withdrawal is not empty, it echoes. Emotional distance becomes the boundary that silently reminds others that access to your heart is a privilege, not an entitlement. It takes wisdom to step away with grace. Anyone can react, but it requires discipline to disengage without bitterness. Emotional distance does not mean emotional indifference. It means you have chosen peace over power struggle. You still feel deeply, but you no longer allow feelings to dictate your boundaries. You can love someone and still recognize that proximity to them disturbs your equilibrium. You can care and still walk away. That is the essence of dignity. The ability to honor love without losing self-respect. In emotional distance, clarity grows. You start to recognize the subtle ways you abandoned yourself to maintain closeness. The times you silenced your intuition, the times you accepted less just to keep peace, the times you gave without receiving. Distance brings those realizations gently, not to shame you, but to awaken you. It whispers that love is not meant to cost your serenity. It shows that every time you tolerated emotional chaos, you were training yourself to live beneath your worth. When you pull back, you begin to see that the love you were trying to preserve was sometimes just a reflection of your fear of letting go. Emotional distance is not always visible. Sometimes it happens inside long before the physical space appears. You start to feel less reactive, less desperate for response, less affected by silence. You begin to detach not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself. This internal distance is quiet and steady. It does not seek to prove a point. It simply reclaims energy. That is where dignity lives, in the invisible decision to protect your peace even when no one understands it. There is a sacred stillness that follows emotional distance. At first, it feels uncomfortable, like the silence after a storm. You might mistake it for loneliness, but it is healing. That stillness is your system recalibrating. It is the sound of your nervous energy settling, your heart learning to beat at its own rhythm again. Emotional distance gives you room to hear yourself clearly, to feel what you actually feel, not what you were conditioned to feel. It gives your intuition space to speak again, unclouded by constant emotional interference. When you step back, something powerful happens. You begin to attract respect instead of begging for it. The energy of dignity carries its own frequency, one that naturally repels chaos. People feel it even if they cannot name it. They sense that your peace is not negotiable. They sense that your attention is no longer given freely, but earned through consistency and honesty. And the ones who were drawn to your emotional availability, but not your depth, will quietly fall away. This is how distance refines connection. It filters truth from illusion without confrontation. In relationships, dignity is often lost when emotion takes control. You try to hold on through persuasion, through pleading, through proving. You lower your standards in the name of love, but what you are really doing is abandoning yourself. Emotional distance reverses that pattern. It teaches that love without boundaries is not love, it is surrender. It reminds you that peace is not found through winning someone back, It is found through returning to yourself. Dignity is restored the moment you stop needing to be chosen and start choosing yourself. Emotional distance also brings awareness of balance, the realization that you cannot pour endlessly into another without eventually becoming empty. Distance allows you to replenish. It reminds you that your emotional energy is sacred currency. You begin to give from fullness, not from fear. You stop reacting to every shift in others' moods and start anchoring in your own. That steadiness radiates strength, and others feel it. They feel that your emotions no longer belong to their control. That is when you truly reclaim your dignity, when your peace no longer depends on anyone's presence or absence. To create emotional distance is to create sacred space. It is the invisible boundary that says, I honor myself enough to step back from what confuses my spirit. In that space, you rebuild. You remember your value. You learn that silence can be strength, that detachment can be love, that peace is not weakness but wisdom. Emotional distance restores dignity because it returns you to yourself, to the part of you that never needed to chase validation, that never needed to explain worth, that always knew stillness speaks louder than desperation. There is a certain kind of silence that speaks louder than any words ever could. It is not the silence of punishment or pride, but the silence that comes after understanding. The kind that follows after a woman has given enough, spoken enough, explained enough. It is the silence that says, Vera, I no longer need to make you see. When you reach that place, something begins to shift in the energy between you. The noise of constant communication fades, and suddenly he begins to hear not your words, but the echo of your absence. This is how silence awakens his reflection. In every connection, energy flows like a current. When you speak, you give energy. When you react, you feed it. When you explain, you extend yourself into another person's awareness. But when you go silent, the current stops. The energy he was used to receiving suddenly disappears, and what remains is a mirror. He begins to see his own behavior reflected back to him. He starts to feel what you used to feel, the waiting, the wondering, the questioning. Your silence turns the connection inside out, making him experience what he never noticed while you were present and expressive. Silence becomes a teacher. It does not accuse or demand, it simply allows truth to surface. When you stop speaking, he begins to listen, not to your voice, but to the emptiness where your voice used to live. He starts to notice the quiet spaces where your energy once flowed easily. He begins to feel the absence of your attention, the weight of your stillness. What he once took for granted now becomes something he reaches for, but cannot find. Silence awakens awareness because it removes the distraction of dialogue. Without words to defend or debate, he is left alone with the raw reality of his own choices. The power of silence lies in its contrast. When someone has grown accustomed to your warmth, your energy, your emotional presence, the sudden absence of it creates a void. That void is not emptiness. It is reflection. It becomes a space where he must meet himself. He begins to revisit the moments he dismissed, the conversations he didn't value, the emotions he ignored. Silence becomes a mirror that reflects every oversight, every imbalance, every piece of effort he did not return. It is through that mirror that understanding begins to dawn, slowly, quietly, deeply. Most people mistake silence for distance, but true silence is not about withdrawal. It is about alignment. It is a way of saying, I no longer want to force understanding. I choose peace instead. And peace has a vibration that cannot be ignored. When you stop speaking, your energy speaks louder. It carries the frequency of self-respect, of calm detachment, of quiet power. He may not understand it immediately, but he will feel it. The more you stop reaching, the more your absence becomes his reminder. The more you remain calm, the more he feels the shift within himself. Silence disrupts patterns. When a man is used to emotional exchange, the reassurance, the reaction, the explanation, silence breaks that rhythm. It removes the familiar comfort of knowing you will always be there to respond. Suddenly, he is left alone with his own mind, replaying what he said, what he did, what changed. He begins to question his own actions because your silence gives him no escape. There is no argument to distract him, no emotional noise to drown out reflection. In that quiet, he feels the truth that something valuable has gone still. What makes silence powerful is not emptiness, but presence. True silence is not a void, it is energy pulled inward. When you stop speaking, your attention returns to yourself. You are no longer projecting outward, trying to connect, fix, or convince. You are centered again, grounded in your own awareness. That stillness radiates. It creates a shift in dynamic because it is no longer about reaction. It is about reflection. He feels it because the energy between you changes form. You are no longer the source of pursuit. You have become the source of mystery. He starts to feel your silence, not only mentally, but energetically. It lingers in the spaces where your energy once lived, in his thoughts, in his routine, in his memory. The silence begins to speak to him in ways you never could through words. It reminds him of your presence without you being there. It replays the moments he overlooked, the kindness he didn't appreciate, the depth he didn't recognize. Every time he reaches out in thought and finds no response, reflection deepens. Silence turns memory into a lesson. The ego resists silence because silence confronts it. When you stop reacting, his ego loses its grip. The control it once held through your emotional engagement dissolves. The silence disarms him, not through manipulation, but through truth. He begins to realize that you no longer operate on the same emotional frequency. Your silence becomes the proof that you have detached from the cycle of reaction. It is no longer about winning or proving. It is about preserving your peace. And that awareness awakens something inside him that no conversation ever could. Self-reflection born out of loss. In silence, the mind has nowhere to hide. It begins to travel back to the moments that led to the quiet. It replays the last words, the tone, the energy. It tries to decode the message behind the absence. That mental loop becomes his teacher. The more he tries to understand, the more he is confronted with himself. Silence becomes a mirror that does not lie. It shows the parts of him that he avoided seeing when the connection was full of noise. It shows how his actions shaped the outcome, how his energy influenced the distance, how his choices built the silence. Silence is powerful because it equalizes. It removes the illusion of control. When you no longer respond, he realizes that he cannot pull you back through manipulation, argument, or attention. He must face the emptiness he helped create. And in that confrontation, something stirs: awareness. He begins to feel empathy. He begins to sense what you felt when you were unheard. The silence becomes the bridge between ignorance and understanding. It humbles him. It makes him see that attention, affection, and presence are not endless. They are gifts that can vanish when unappreciated. When silence enters a connection, it resets the balance. It gives both people the chance to meet truth without the noise of emotion. For you, it becomes healing, a return to inner peace. For him, it becomes reflection, a slow awakening to the value of what he lost. He may not admit it immediately, but he feels it deeply. The energy of your silence travels into his awareness like ripples in still water, touching his mind, his memory, his conscience. It speaks in the language only the heart understands, not through sound, but through sensation. Your silence carries the message that no words could deliver, that your energy, once freely given, now belongs to peace, that you will not argue for attention, you will not plead for understanding, you will not trade your self-worth for reassurance. In silence, you remind him of the difference between presence and proximity, between attention and effort. Silence makes him feel your value, not because you tell him, but because he feels the loss of your energy where it once gave light. It awakens his reflection not through noise, but through the quiet echo of what was once love freely offered and now withdrawn into stillness,